Dialectical Journal, Unit 1 by Taylor Madison. In this video, I will be covering 4 stories: A and P by John Updike, Shiloh by Bobby Ann Mason, A Rose for Emily by William Faulkner, and The Story of an Hour by Kate Chopin. She was the queen. She kind of led them, the other two peeking around and making their shoulders round. She didn't look around, not this queen. She just walked straight on slowly on these long white prima donna legs. Sammy recognizes the authority that Queenie has established over her two friends, and he seems inspired. This was a turning point in his outlook on the future because he started to realize if he did not take charge of his life, he would end up like Stokesy, forever striving to become manager of a grocery store. The two friends accompanying her are symbolic of the way he has allowed his parents to determine his life. Until now, he has been peering over their shoulders, watching them orchestrate his life. Queenie's independence reminds him that he needs to make his own choices and not allow others' opinions to control him. The sheep pushing their carts down the aisle were pretty hilarious. I bet you could set off dynamite in an A and P and the people would by and large keep reaching and checking oatmeal off their lists and muttering, "Let me see, there was a third thing. Began with A. Asparagus? No. Ah, yes, applesauce." Or whatever it is they do mutter. Although Sammy's comparison of customers to sheep was rather rude, it painted a picture in my mind that was probably similar to what Updike was attempting to communicate. After reading this, all I could picture was old ladies tottering around the market, completely immersed in their shopping and occasionally bumping into one another. It also reminded me of a previous section where Sammy talked about the old witch that waited for him to make a mistake so that she could scold him profusely. The fact that he thinks they would not be disrupted by dynamite exploding aids the image of the shoppers being single-minded and focused on the task at hand. Leroy remembers Norma Jean standing catatonically beside him in the hospital and himself thinking, "Who is this strange girl?" He had forgotten who she was. Now scientists are saying that crib death is caused by a virus. Nobody knows anything, Leroy thinks. The answers are always changing. Leroy's last comment about things always changing foreshadowed the fact that his marriage had been strong until the baby died. This event caused a gap to form between Norma Jean and Leroy. His accident could have been an opportunity to grow closer, but instead Norma Jean tells him that she wants to leave. These must have been the exact opposite words Leroy was hoping to hear on the visit to Shiloh. I also found it ironic that Mabel, Norma Jean's mother, went to Shiloh for her honeymoon while Norma Jean visited at the end of a relationship. Leroy used to tell hitchhikers his whole life story. He quit talking to hitchhikers when he realized how his voice sounded, whiny and self-pitying, like some teenage tragedy song. Now Leroy had the sudden impulse to tell Norma Jean about himself, as if he had just met her. They have known each other so long they have forgotten a lot about each other. They could have become reacquainted, but when the oven timer goes off and she runs to the kitchen, he forgets why he wants to do this. I felt sorry for Leroy because his feelings for Norma Jean had been intensified during his time away from her. Now that he was home again, he wanted things to be the way they were years before, but Norma Jean was not happy to have him back. He also wanted to build a log cabin for her, but she did not appreciate his thoughtfulness. One could argue that it was more of a gesture for himself than for her, but I think that it symbolized his desire for a new start. On several occasions he tries to tell her his feelings, but before the words escape his lips, she is gone. The story ends with this same theme. When Miss Emily Grierson died, our whole town went to her funeral. The men through a sort of respectful affection for a fallen monument, the women mostly out of a curiosity to see the inside of her house, which no one save an old manservant, a combined gardener and cook, had seen in at least 10 years. I am amazed that somebody could stay in their house for 10 years straight, because I cannot imagine doing such a thing. Emily seemed like a reclusive person who was very private. Her father may have been the only person she deeply cared for, but keeping a dead body in one's house is a bit extreme. The fact that the whole town went to her funeral, despite not knowing her, would be peculiar in any other situation, but if I had lived in the town, I would have been interested to see her house as well. So the next night, after midnight, 4 men crossed Miss Emily's lawn and slunk about the house like burglars, sniffing along the base of the brickwork and at the cellar openings, while one of them performed a regular sewing motion with his hand out of a sack slung from his shoulder. They broke open the cellar door and sprinkled lime there and in all the outbuildings. As they recrossed the lawn, a window that had been dark was lighted, and Miss Emily sat in it, the light behind her, and her upright torso motionless as that of an idol. The men that crept onto her lawn to cure the stench were very brave, because I would have been frightened beyond belief if a figure appeared in a window suddenly. The way Faulkner describes her as being motionless as that of an idol is plain creepy. After reading this, I was expecting to find out that she had been killed that night. This story is definitely one of horror, although I did like that it was told from a point of view that made me want to understand her better. She did not hear the story as many women have heard the same, with a paralyzed inability to accept its significance. She wept at once, with sudden wild abandonment, in her sister's arms. When the storm of grief had spent itself, she went away to her room alone. She would have no one follow her. After finishing the story, my impression of this section changed because I realized that Lois was probably crying out of joy, not despair. If she really had been upset, she would have wanted to be comforted, but instead she opted to stay in her room. By doing this, she was allowing herself to feel the freedom for the first time, without having to act in a way that did not match her true emotions. She is confused at first because she does not know how to feel about the tragedy, but finally she figures out that she is relieved. No longer will she have to live with repression. She knew that she would weep again when she saw the kind, tender hands folded in death, the face that would never look save with love upon her, fixed with grey and dead. But she saw beyond that bitter moment a long procession of years to come that would belong to her absolutely, and she opened and spread her arms out to them in welcome. There would be no one to live for during those coming years. She would live for herself. I was strangely happy for her loss, because she was going to be a free woman from that point on. Brentley Mallard was not a bad husband. He always loved her and was kind, but something about her life was not fulfilling. Some people would be lost without someone to live for, but not Miss Mallard. She was happy to finally live for herself. Only days before she had thought with dread how long her life was, but now she embraced the years she had left.